Hello and welcome to the 90-Minute Fever podcast with Steve and Nick. For those of you who don't know who we are, I'm Steve, one of the admins in game, manager of Strictly Better Side Up in the Twilight FA, and Nick is the lead developer of 90-Minute Fever. This is the 14th podcast in the series. We hope you enjoyed our previous podcasts. If you're interested in those, they are all available on the Icicon YouTube channel, so please take a look at those. From now onwards, we're going to be doing our best to do these podcasts a little shorter and a little more often to try and keep you guys better updated about what's going on, and hopefully not to overload you with too much in each one. So we'll try and keep this one to half an hour or so if we can. In today's podcast, we're going to be discussing some further changes to the transfer system, and that's to build on the building blocks that were put in place last month. So Nick, to kick things off, what do we think? Has the new system fixed the problems faced with the older system?
Oh gosh, start with the
big questions to start.
Getting a lot more done since the last major update. So the main fundamental underlying theme of the whole thing was that we just wanted to get more development done, and it's very clear to us, like internally, that we're just doing more, so that's good. So the future does look really good for the coming months, the coming year, that a lot more will get done. So it's really great from that perspective. We definitely have had a very big reduction in the amount of inter-user tension, which is saving resources from us, from people arguing and having problems with each other. Of course, there still are some, though. As long as I think you let people sort of interact with each other, especially with sort of chat with whatever you want to say, which we would like to try to keep in the game. But as long as you have that, then obviously you're going to have people that just don't get along with each other. Basically, if they can say anything they want to each other, it's just a fact of life. So we're still having a bit of problems, but they're really reduced a lot. And obviously, cheating is really it's pretty much already just a thing of the past. Really, just about. I mean, it's from that perspective, it really has worked wonders, and but it's not all perfect. Obviously, there are still issues. There's massive scope to improve it. It was always the case that what we did really just wanted a simple baseline, knowing that it wouldn't be perfect, it'd be far from perfect. And we really just wanted to make sure it worked. There was a simple base. It wasn't complicated with all elaborate rules and stuff. It was just really simple, straightforward to start with, and to let the users use it and get their feedback, which we've got a lot of that, and shape the direction of it based on the feedback that we're receiving, rather than having a start point where we're trying to sort of guess what everybody wants and how everybody feels about things, rather than trying to guess it all, just to actually get that feedback and make changes based on that feedback. So we've got a lot of feedback from people. That's really good, and it's a big thank you. This is all types of feedback. I guess even when people are really upset or angry about things and speak their mind, that is feedback, and quite a bit of that has been helpful as well. So thank you to all the angry people. And then just a lot of generally really constructive, simple things like, I've got this player who's really good and he's not worth anything, he should be worth more. That's useful. And just we've got a lot of feedback in regards to people, just specific examples and players that they feel should be worth more or less or whatever, which has been really helpful. And just general comments about the system. And there's been quite a few suggestions about things that are some things that we could do more shorter term, and some things that are a bit more potentially sort of more fundamental gameplay changes that could be longer term. But just generally, there's just a lot of feedback, and that's really good for us, because as I said, we intentionally wanted to start it as just a really clean slate and shape it based on the feedback. So getting that feedback is really useful to help us shape it going forwards. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I think obviously we don't want to go into too many details about what the various problems with the older system were, because that's
I think the main one really, I mean, there's the system, how in the past, but at present, I think the biggest issues really with the system is just with the values and the wages. Really, just that's the biggest single problem, that a lot of players aren't really worth what they should be worth. That's, I mean, obviously you can debate whether you like the system or not, but if you putting that aside for a second, if you look at the actual system, the biggest problem with it is that, by far. If the values were better, the system would just be a lot better. And there's a lot of other things that we could do to improve or expand it, but the biggest fundamental problem with the system at present is that the valuations for the players and everything that hinges off of that, like the wages and whatever, they're just not accurate enough.
Sure, absolutely, and I think that's it. And I mean, and that's what this podcast is all about, really. The building blocks are in place. The general structure and system, as you said, is now there and ready for us to finalise, not finalise it necessarily, but just tweak with it and make sure it works as intended. So what are the we've got a change coming with some new transfer system changes, as we alluded to at the start. What are the changes that are being made?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think it's a bit hard really, because you call it a tweak, but it's a lot more than a tweak, and it's kind of not a big change either. It's really just it's more like it's evolving, I guess you could say. So I think fundamentally the system is unchanged, really. You still buy and sell the players in exactly the same way. I don't think there's any rule changes or anything. The only thing that's really changed is how the values of the players are worked out, really. That's it. And then the wages as well. So apologies, I've got a bit of a cold at the moment. So the biggest thing really is that. So with the values, previously it was really obvious. I think you could say that a lot of players the value just wasn't the right value. I mean, I'm sure you've got players that have a value that you just never would sell them for. And everybody's squad has ended up in that spot, really, because either the values, like most, you've got the players that you would never ever sell them for. It doesn't make any sense, and obviously you just keep all of those. So your squad over time inevitably just ends up being a squad full of those players, because all the ones that you would really obviously sell because they're worth too much, they're all long gone, right? You sold all those on day one, basically, when we transitioned, and then all the players that are in that sort of grey zone, you sort of end up naturally selling those because of the fact that you've got so many other players that are just really undervalued and underpaid compared to how great they are. So you're definitely going to keep all of them, and then it makes the decision making for everything else more straightforward. And over time, you've just probably ended up with a squad full of players that you would never consider selling, pretty much.
Yeah, I think that's probably
and that's
fair
because
reflection.
the values are all off, and basically you're severely undervalued players. It makes no sense to sell them because, one, you wouldn't get the price that's worth selling, and two, by definition extension of that, really, what you have to pay to keep them is you're underpaying them wages as well. You're not paying them sort of fair wages compared to their impact, but also their value that you could sell them for isn't fair compared to the impact that they could make as well. So you just end up in a position where there's no decision.
Yeah, and I guess by following on from that, you're effectively in a position. Everyone's in that position, so therefore it means that if you do sell someone, it's very difficult to replace them as well.
Yeah, I think by everybody at the top, sure. I think for new users, it's not quite the same because they sort of progress and can improve their squad over time. So for new users, they're sort of were okay-ish. But this, in particular, for all the users at the very top, which I'm guessing would be the majority of people listening to this, yeah, it's a big problem. It's a big problem. They've all ended up in that position, and yeah. So, I mean, the most obvious fix is really what we've done, which is the values just should be correct. The values need to be a lot more accurate. And we've done a number of changes to make that happen, to make it far more intelligent how it's assigning sort of the AI, so to speak, how it decides what those values should be is we put in a lot of effort to make it a lot more intelligent. And I think people are, it's going to rock the boat, so to speak, because especially for these at the top, because as we said, they've just all ended up with these squads of players that are severely undervalued and underpaid. Well, at least, maybe not the whole squad, but at least pretty much all these at the top are going to have a number of players that are like that, and those players are going to go up in value, in some cases a lot, but also their wages are going to go up. So there's sort of two main things. The first is the biggest one by far, really, which is that it's just much more intelligent how it decides how good a player is, basically, and it's also driving that intelligence based on users. So what users are doing. So essentially the main thing really is that it's now saying not all attributes are created equal for all players, and it's looking at how users are playing the game and how users are valuing and what they're paying for players, and then it's saying that for certain players, in certain positions, certain types of players, that some attributes are more or less important than other attributes. And it's something that we could definitely, from here, it's a really good start point, and we could definitely sort of potentially improve this going forwards as well, but if we need to. But I guess in simple terms, what it's doing is if it's saying that users on average are paying a lot more for strikers who have high finishing and off the ball and whatever, and therefore because of that, all strikers in the game that have high finishing and off the ball are just generally worth more, if that makes sense, in very simple terms. So if all of a sudden, for whatever crazy reason, all the top users in the game decided to start paying tens or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 million for all of the strikers in the game that had 20 in tackling, then basically what would happen is then all of a sudden all of the strikers in the game that have high tackling would end up being worth more, because the logic is going to think that tackling is really important for strikers. Now, obviously in practice, that isn't the case. In practice, people are not buying strikers with high tackling, they're buying strikers with high finishing. So basically it's user driven, so it sort of calculates this whole entire attribute map of what it thinks are important for all these different things on a daily basis. So as the market changes, as whatever happens each day unfolds, it then factors that information in to update this. So basically it's kind of a bit sort of living and breathing based on what users are doing and feel important, which could definitely be important, like really, as time changes, especially with tactics and the match engine and things like that. Like different tactics can be important over time. There's like a meta, right? And so it might be the case that, I'm trying to think of an example here. So there are, like for example, there's been various stages of this game where people treat endurance as being super important and the less important, and people might think determination is important and things like that. And based on the fact that lots of people all of a sudden think that determination might be super important, then all of a sudden players with determination would be worth more. If all of a sudden people aren't too fussed about it, then it wouldn't impact things as much. So that's the main thing really. So how that sort of manifests itself really is if you have a player who's sort of generally got good attributes but also has ridiculously good attributes for his position, then he's just going to be worth way more now than he was before, basically. Sure,
which is realistic, isn't it? And that's the main thing. So what
there's another thing, quickly, there's a second thing, just to cover it so we don't have to come back, which is also how well and how much and what level they're playing.
So basically, if a player is playing well for your team, and if a player is playing it most games for your team, they're likely to, on combination with the attributes, they're likely to be worth more, basically.
Yeah, I think a lot more, because it's also the case, obviously, that the players there's overlap between these factors, right? So whatever player on your senior team has the highest average rating and he's playing every match, presumably, he probably also has really good attributes for his position, right?
Yeah, you'd think there's strong overlap here, wouldn't you?
But basically, so these factors kind of like magnify each other to some degree, which means basically if you've just got a player who's really, 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 really good, he will now just be worth a lot, and it's kind of how it should be, really.
Well, yeah, of course, and I'd guess alongside that, higher value equals higher wages.
Yeah, which is also how it needs to be. Otherwise, yeah. Hopefully, it's obvious why. Do we need to go into why? Maybe we do. Maybe it's not
I think we should. I think the fact that you need, with higher transfer values, particularly with those top quality players, I think it's important to explain.
Sure.
That why the wages need to be high as well. So I think we should go into that.
Yeah. Okay. So in simple terms, if the wages aren't high, then all you need to do is create a situation where you have a low wage bill because the wages aren't high. And then you save money every month, and then you just buy good player after good player after good player after good player after good player, and you never really have to sell anybody. It doesn't matter what they're worth, because if you're not paying them any wages, it's sort of just a no-brainer to keep them. And really, there's no real skill or meaningful decision making. It's not balanced. It's not fair. It doesn't really. It's just saying the longer you've played, the higher you are, the more advantage you get, and it just makes it so that new users obviously can't catch up, because the longer you play, you have an advantage. It's just not balanced, and it's not fair. I'm not sure how you can. Can you add anything, Steve? It's obvious to me. I'm not sure how to say how it's fair if in real life Lionel Messi plays for free for Barcelona.
Well, I mean,
I think a better example might be the NBA in real life, really. Because I'm not sure if not all of our users will follow it, obviously, but that has a salary cap, so it's a bit different. And how that's evolved and what's happening with the Golden State Warriors, it's very hard to argue that that's fair. There's a salary cap in American sports. There's one team that's clearly the best team in the NBA, and now all of the best players want to play for that team because they'll win the championship, and they're all basically choosing to play for that team for minimum wage. So you've got the team that's already the best team, with all the best players moving to the team that's already the best team to play there for no salary, so that the team can stay under the salary cap, basically, which is just fundamentally ridiculous and goes against everything that the nature of the whole entire system and structure and what the salary cap is supposed to do. It's supposed to make sure that the playing field is level, so to speak. So in other words, I think that there is a relationship or correlation between that and essentially what would happen if you could have all of the best players without having to pay them any wages or anything that is basically materially below what is fair for them. And what is fair is essentially what really is just what lots and lots and lots of other users in the game would happily pay that player in wages, really.
Sure. And just moving on from this a little, let's talk about the reasoning for these changes a little. I mean, it's clearly the transfer market's quieter for the reasons we spoke earlier. Now, the main thing I think these changes do is they force users to make really tough decisions, and that is what you really want. It shouldn't be easy, should it? You should look at a player, go, well, he's worth a lot of money, brilliant, but God, I am paying him a lot. Do I want to sell him or do I not want to sell him? And you want the prices and the wages to actually put users to decisions here, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I think you want it so that there's always a decision for every player, and that it's always in that grey zone where you're not quite sure, and sort of what dictates whether it's the correct or incorrect decision isn't really based on just that player in isolation. It's based on the rest of your squad, what level you can compete at this season, whether you're building for the future or not, what other players are available in the transfer market. It's all of these other factors that should be driving the decision. The decision in isolation should never just be obvious. It shouldn't be okay, yeah, this is my best player. He's worth 50 million to me, and I can only sell him for 3 million. I'm never going to sell him. It doesn't matter who else is available. It doesn't matter what I'm planning to do, how I can compete. All of those factors make no difference at all. I'm just never going to sell him. And on the same note, if you've just got some player who's really bad, you're never going to use, whatever, blah, 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 and you can sell him for a few million, you're just going to sell him. None of the other factors matter. You're never going to use him. You're never going to play him. You can get some money. You can get an unfairly high amount of money for him. There's just no reason to keep him, basically. and you just don't want decisions to be black and white like that. You want every decision to fall. Ideally, I mean, the real objective here, and I think we've gone a massive leap towards achieving it, quite frankly, because we've been doing a lot of testing with this, checking the values. I think really it is the case. It's almost really, you have to go out of your way to sort of find examples where the decision is not in this really stressful, biting your fingernails, pulling your hair out type stress zone. Like, it's almost like every player in your squad, I think the measure here is how stressed people are. Really, the more stressed everybody is, it's like the better the change. Obviously, it's going to be hard for some people to see it that way because they're obviously just going to be stressed. But really, from a gameplay perspective, the more of, if all of the players in the whole game can fall within this grey zone where everybody's just really not sure if they should keep or sell them, and it's just all the decisions are really hard, and that's ultimately where, if we're not quite there yet, then we need to, obviously, that's the objective, that's the long-term objective, to get to that exact place. But honestly, we're close after this change already, I think, because we've gone through lots and lots and lots of user squads, going through all the players one at a time, and honestly, it's just not going to be easy at all. It's going to be some really tough decisions for people to make.
And that's what you want, isn't it? You don't want a game that is just you're going through the motions. You want a game where you're logging in and you've got decisions to make every day. You don't want it to be easy for those top users. You want it, we always wanted this game to make it really tough to stay at the top. And I think these changes definitely help with that. And that's key to sort of keeping people interested and keeping people playing the game. You don't want it to be easy. You want it to be difficult. And I think this change to me appears to up the skill factor
massively. I think. I mean, we always obviously. I mean, like I said, we did this system. I mean, it was always the intention that we would want to give people this. It's not like we all of a sudden decided that we wanted to give people meaningful decisions to make it. It was always the intention that we take it into this place over time. It's just that, it's a bit, I don't know, to say it's unfortunate, but it's also intentional. I mean, the start point was intentionally really simple. We knew that it wouldn't be perfect, and we did want to, rather than trying to guess everything, we wanted to actually make the changes based on feedback. So it is what it is, I guess. And the interim period, I mean, in relativistic terms, for how long a project like this takes and will continue to take, the elapsed amount of time here between this update and the system being implemented isn't really that long. I mean, it's like 1 point something months, right? It's less than 2 months. So it's in relativistic terms, there's a new transfer system, this change comes. But down the track, obviously, the values are correct, and everybody just, hey, remember that time where there was like this one season where the values were too low, kind of thing. Like, it sort of just becomes a thing of the past. Obviously, there was a big transition. There will be, the boat was rocked. The boat is being rocked again, quite frankly, because a lot of these top users, or all of them really, it's just to different degrees. They're going to end up with these players now that are really, that they had, that were really, really good, that are now worth a lot of money and now need to be paid hard wages. And the reality is that lots and lots of people just are not going to be able to keep all of them, or how the status quo can't be just kept. They can't have a good under 18 squad and a good under 21 squad and 5 or 6 superstar players and have all of these other good really senior players and have all of these squad players in their senior team that are really solid that they don't really ever use. Like, you just won't be able to tick all of these boxes. You'll have to pick and choose, basically. Do you want, and I think it's just going to be really difficult to sort of maintain, like, once you're sort of talking about more than 3 or 4 superstar type players, it's just going to be really difficult. And everyone that you add in addition to that, it's just going to be more and more difficult to just maintain that status quo. It's going to be harder and harder. You're going to have to be much more careful about how much you pay for them to begin with. You're going to have to be much more careful about not having squad players you don't really need. You're going to need to make sure that the squad players that you do have are sort of younger, that you can build their value up over time, and maybe like it's just going to take a lot more. It's going to take. It's like trade-offs, if you know what I mean. You won't be able to just have everything. You're going to have to juggle things around and much more. And I think it needs to be that way. Really, otherwise, if you don't have to make any of these decisions, then really there isn't. One, you're really limiting the amount of skill involved in the game. But two, you're really making it. If somebody can just have 10 superstar players, 20 really good players they never use, and a really strong under 18s team and a really strong under 21 team, and it's just easy to do all of that and make money every single month and just move onwards and upwards forever, then really where's the reason why anybody would ever start playing the game? Like, you can never catch up to that person. So there does need to be this, like, it's not like a hard ceiling, it's like this soft ceiling where you get to this point and you're kind of winning everything or doing really, really well. And from that point, the objective of the game really from that point isn't to get better and better and better and better. The objective really is to try to stay there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's to try to just not fall. And inevitably, you just go into it at some point, and then people will obviously not always react to that very positive, but it's just an inevitability, really. But then, obviously, the objective is to get back again.
Yeah.
Or to put another way, kind of like real life. You just look at Manchester United. It's like, winning everything, big club or whatever, and they haven't done anything for a while, but people aren't really happy about it. Everybody sports club or whatever, but their objective, I'm sure, in the longer term, is still to get back to being number one. And I'm sure that's how everybody, all the supporters, everybody involved in the club, I'm sure that's what they're expecting, that's what they're planning, that's what they're hoping to do in the long term. Will they ever do it? Who only knows? But they're going to try, right? So I think it sort of needs to be seen a bit that way. Whereas if you instead looked at it like when Manchester United were dominating everything, instead they just pulled away further and further and further from everybody else year and year and year after that, then nobody would ever be able to. Like they, they would never not finish first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's part of it, and then obviously there's other factors here, like we've got sort of legacy carryover in regards to the fact that people have got a lot of money for how the game worked in the past, which they're then being forced to sort of spend, and they've ended up with squads that there's a number of users that just had a lot of money that isn't really possible to get that volume of money anymore, and then the dividends sort of force them into a state where they've had to do something with it.
So they've got a lot of assets now, basically.
Yeah, now those assets are going to be worth, well, one, they're going to be worth more, and two, they're going to have to pay them more wages. So I think those users will look at this situation, and it's basically going to be the case that it just isn't sustainable. Just isn't. Like, they're in this situation, it isn't sustainable. You can't have 10 or more world-class players and sustain that setup. It just isn't going to be possible, and they might not be happy about that. And no particular reason why they should be happy about it. They're probably not going to be, but unfortunately, it's just sort of a fact of life, because it has to be that way, because new users can't possibly get the type of money that they. Like, nobody starting the game today could ever sort of get the type of money that they once had. The way that the game worked before, they managed to get to a place where nobody playing today could ever get to. And there just needs to be this correction where they fall to a place where somebody starting today could conceivably ever get to one day, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that every new user is going to catch up to them. I'm just saying it has to be possible that somebody technically could. And some of these users have reached places where it isn't technically possible that anybody ever could do it. And they're in that place now. But they're also in this position, especially with this change now with the wages. It's just the whole, it's not going to be sustainable. The income that they're making.
Yeah, they're going to have choices to make, aren't they? They're going to have choices to make. So clearly they're going to have some great assets to sell. These big clubs are going to have some real assets to sell here, but they're going to be put to some real choices, because the wages are also going to be through the roof. So can they keep hold of these assets for very long? Probably not. they're going to have to start balancing. But you sell a big asset, suddenly you've got a lot of money to keep you going for a little bit longer, so it gives you more time to make more choices.
Yeah, in some of these cases, you're talking about more than a little bit longer. So you're talking about a long bit longer. But I think that's amazing. I mean, the thing is, you've got to. I mean, I'm making it sound negative, but the reality is that the people in these positions where they're faced with these really tough decisions, they're still like exceptionally well off, like compared to people who started playing the game recently.
Yeah, and I also think they've worked to, maybe they worked hard to build a great squad, maybe they worked hard to get loads of money together. Either way, they're still they're still getting dividends for doing that. They're just, if they were one of the users that stored up money, they obviously now got a great squad of assets, which are now worth a lot of money. It just means that these users, rather than just coasting along with all these assets, now they're going to have to make some decisions, which I think is good for them. So I don't think it's a negative thing for them. I'm sure most of them will understand that it's needed for the game. You can't have users that are so far ahead they can never be caught. And this is a balancing change, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's a bit hard to say. There's obviously exceptions all over the place, but generally speaking, everybody that's in the boat where their wages has rocketed up, they're also in the boat that their squad is worth a lot more as well. So they've got this problem that this situation is unsustainable, but they've got a lot of solutions to the problem. They've got a lot of choices. They've got a lot of options. And the thing is, there'll be a lot of people in this situation, a lot of people that have to sell some players for sure, and there'll be a lot of people who choose to sell players as well. But there's a lot of people that sort of will have to, and obviously that means a lot of players are going to enter the market, which means that there's a lot of other options available to you, if that makes sense. Well, I can't keep these 5 superstar players, but I can sell one of them and then buy this other player as a replacement who's on half the wages or whatever.
Absolutely, and it should make the whole transfer system just more fluid, shouldn't it? It should
going forward for sure. I mean, there'll definitely be this sort of transition where obviously a lot of people will. Well, the thing is, it's like the wages are going up, but it's like you've got all of this squad value. It's like you have to come up with the solution to the problem, but it doesn't have to be today. Like you can take your time here. You're losing money on a daily basis, but does that really matter when you've got a lot of money, at least a lot of money in regards to the asset value of your squad and players you could sell? At any point, you could sell one of these better players and sort of correct the finances. So there is some degree of urgency to do something about it, but it doesn't have to be done within a day or two. You could definitely take your time and make sure that you find, essentially in each case, line up the replacement and then sell the player and buy the replacement instantly each time. That would definitely be possible as well. So there will definitely be this transition, and there will be a lot of good players available. But going forwards, the whole thing is that these values just falling in this grey area. So there should always sort of be this everybody being faced with these decisions, which means that sometimes people will decide to sell, which means that more players will be available, which means that other people are more likely. So you basically it'll work more like it was always intended to work, if that makes sense. Like there's just this constant supply of players available that you're interested in, which in turn means that you're constantly faced with tough decisions. And typically speaking, when people will buy these players, it's also going to result in them selling other players. And now the players that are worth more are the ones that are good, and therefore other people are likely to want those and create decisions for other people. So I think it's just, it should work a lot better. I think from here, it's really that this is a very rock the boat type thing, because it's really drastic what's happening in regards to the values and wages for a lot of people. But going forwards, I think that the changes are more likely to be like balancing and refinements and stuff, if you know what I mean. Changing things by small percentages and stuff. So it shouldn't really be like anybody has to do anything major for anything future. I think this is enough that we now would be taken to the place where it's just really balanced, and it's just a case of just small refinements and maybe closing off potential exploits or bugs or whatever that may be discovered in the future. But I think but we're really just happy looking at it. It's based on sort of code and logic and whatever. It's never going to be perfect, but honestly, I think the values are almost like it's very hard to compare it to a human because every human will come up with a different answer. That's the thing. So you can never even say is the value that it's coming up with correct or not. But it just really feels like it's just so close now. Just from the stress factor, the fact that you're looking at these players and you don't know what he would do. And I think that's just a clear sign that the value is in the ballpark. If you don't know if you'd sell them or keep them, then it means the values are in the ballpark. I think it's just such a good. It's the main indicator really is the fact the more you have to think, the better the value is. I think.
I agree. So I guess in summary, what's it going to mean for users logging in after this change? I would say generally, this is a generalisation because there's so many different types of squads, but I'd say generally your squad could be worth more, particularly for the experienced top division users. Your squad's worth more. Your wages are going to be higher. Maybe some of your squad players are going to be worth less, depending on, again, the build of your squad. Players you don't play very often might be worth less. Players that have poor average ratings might be worth less. Players with good average ratings are going to be worth a lot more, quite possibly. I'd say that's very much a generalisation. Would you say that's reasonably accurate?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the biggest things when we're looking at really is that the real top class players are just worth way more, basically. So if you've got multiples of those, especially if you more than 3 or 4, then you're one of these sort of real super drastically hit users. Hit in regards to hit with a great big nice bonus in extra squad value for you to make a lot of money if you want to, but also hit with high wages to sustain if you don't want to sell the players. So that's one big thing. Another big thing is kind of just like, I don't know, more like run-of-the-mill, like average type players, but that have really good attributes for their position. They're worth significantly more than before. And then the run-of-the-mill average players that have poor attributes for position, they're worth way less than before. And then the other big thing really is where you've got youth players, especially in your under-21 squad, that are sort of kicking some butt. I don't know, can you say that on a podcast maybe? Not sure. But they're just doing really well. And for your under-21s, they're just doing really, really well. And they've just got really good attributes for their position, good attributes across the board and everything. Those players are now actually worth money, typically speaking. So, just good attributes for position, good attributes across the board, playing really, really well. And they'll see a bit of a sharp increase generally across the board for you. So in other words, really, I don't know how to put it, but it's almost just like the main difference is that players are just
worth what they
should be.
Yeah, I guess so.
Almost. And then another big thing is sort of all those really bland, terrible youth players that don't really have any useful attributes for their position are all basically just worth nothing. Yeah.
So would you say this change has maybe addressed some of the quick profit type schemes that you may be able to do with this first change? Some people were buying and selling players pretty quickly because they could see they're undervalued. Is that still going to be possible to an extent, or is it just?
No, it won't be. So there's another change we haven't covered yet, which is that now when you buy a player from the pool or an academy player, that their initial value is just going to be 75% of what you paid for them, and then from there it will sort of pull upwards or downwards over time based on all of these other factors, which basically means it's impossible to flip somebody for a quick profit because even if you get them really undervalued, it's still going to take some time for them to move from 75% to profit territory.
Sure.
So really, I think if you're talking about sort of buying a player with the intention to sell them for a profit, but not to actually do anything else with that player, I mean, it depends what you call a profit as well. I mean, there's a profit and there's a profit, right? There's making technically any money, and then there's making enough money to make the whole entire ordeal worth it in regards to covering off the wages that you had to pay, in regards to compromising your first team results and your long-term progression, in regards and reputation and other revenue streams, and in regard, the signing fee you had to pay and everything, to offset all of that. I think to make all of that, I just don't think that all of that's ever going to be worth it basically anymore. But because the thing is, the value isn't really going to. The only way that you can get the value up quickly is basically by playing them in your first team and them doing really well. And the types of players that people are doing this with are not the types of players that you would put in your first team, and even if you did, they're not going to play really well. So, I think it's just a thing of the past. I mean, I wouldn't say that's technically impossible. Once you factor all these things in, honestly, it just doesn't make any sense versus just scouting out players that have the right attributes for the position and actually putting them in the youth team and actually developing them up for a few seasons. That could certainly pay big dividends. Yeah. That's just going to be a much more viable strategy.
That's the difference, in my opinion. You don't want people just flipping profits on players, just not even looking at what the player's like in some cases, just saying, I think I can make some money off this guy, sell him in a few days, job done. Really, that's not what the game should be about. It should be about getting a player in, trying to train him up, trying to get him to play well in your team, in your system, and then basically having that decision to make. He's worth more now, but his wages may be starting to go up. But I tell you what, I could sell him for a profit now, and maybe, that's how people should be profiting from this kind of thing. I think, rather than just buying and selling in a few days. Yeah, they've not really.
So that'll be the case. So because the value is fixed in that way, like you can't. There's no real easy way for anybody to see these players, like there's no big indicators like a singular value like that you can say, I'm just going to make money if I do this. That's the thing, right? So, and a lot of people count up the total attributes or whatever, but even that's not really a thing because not all attributes are now created equal for all players. So, counting the attributes is, whatever. Obviously, if the number's twice as high for one player than another player, probably means they're definitely going to end up worth more. But it's not really.
It's less of a factor now, isn't it?
It's far less because the attributes are they're extremely far from created equal. So if all you're doing is counting them and treating them all equally, then it's really not going to tell you much. It's not going to tell you anything more useful than looking at a player's average rating, for example.
Sure.
How well they're playing in the past or whatever. So when you're buying, essentially, in order to get a feel for what a player could be worth in the future, you need to it's sort of more like, what are their attributes? Am I going to use them? Am I not? How well are they going to progress? What are their attributes likely to look like in the future? What type of player are they likely? It's just really, I think it's something that's going to be really hard to sort of quantify with just looking at a number, and so it's going to be more like you just have a gut feel for these things, if that makes sense. I'm sure you act that way with the youth players you sign, Steve. You just see he looks good. I don't know why. He just has he has the right numbers. I got the good gut feel that he's going to turn into a good player, and it's going to be more like that. And if he does turn, and what you consider to be a good player, obviously might not be 100% correlation with what the average of the user base feels as a good player, but there definitely is going to be a strong correlation. That's the thing. Yeah. It's not going to be like totally offset or off the mark. So.
Okay. Well, I think that gives people a decent idea of what they should generally expect from this next change, and I think the balance should be good. I think there's a few other little tweaks and things in this system. The TV projection, I believe that's going to be shown on grass now. Is that right, Nick?
Yeah, so the base TV rights will be included in the projection, and you can spend it. Obviously, this means that it's projected, so if you don't earn it every day, then you don't. If you don't earn it, you don't get it still. But it's showing that you would. So it's a tricky one how you do it, and we might get some feedback in regards to how we could display this to people to make it a bit. If there is any confusion issues, potentially, I'm not sure. So, but yeah, it'll be projected so you can spend it before you get it. Most people who are looking to log in to see if they are earning it, as long as people are aware that they still need to earn it, which it says on the manager briefing widget, whether they've earned it each day or not. But yeah, it's included. There's reasons for that. I mean, one of the main reasons why it needed to be removed to begin with was because of cheating, which is no longer a factor. So now that we don't have to build that into the game, into every single design choice for the game, so that's gone. That was the main reason.
I suppose the secondary reason is obviously the fact that it should be slightly easier for people to generally get their TV rights going forwards with the reduction in
as well
time.
Yeah, which will start of next month as well. So that one. It's on the chain. It was on the forum post, but It's the only change there is that it's in 5-minute blocks of time rather than 15. So to earn your base TV rights, you only need to request a match for 5 minutes in your FA time window. And also, if you can't consistently log in at the same time, you can move to the Perpetual FA and basically request for 5 minutes at any point during the day each day and get your TV rights. So yeah, it's very, very achievable now for everybody. And it's just included in the projection, which just helps, I think, a bit better with actually planning what the reality of your situation is going to be going forwards with so you can really see exactly where you're going to stand if you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's and it's the base, so it's not the bonus. So in theory, if you earn in the bonus every day, then you're still going to end up with more than what it says.
Okay. The other thing I was going to mention, there'll be a temporary sell price in place again for a few days, won't there?
Till the end of the season, end of this season. Yeah. So this is for the instance where you had a player who was worth more before the update, and now after the update he's worth less. You'd be able to sell him for what he was worth before, but only for the rest of this month. So for the best part of a week. Yeah. So it's going to rock the boat. It helps make it a little bit less rocky for a few people. It means that some people that might have been exploiting various systems end up with being able to sell players for a bit more, whatever, but get a bit out of it. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that everything just works going forwards.
Absolutely.
And that people can't. At the end of the day, it's a game. It's an online competitive game. For a lot of people, the game is to try to discover the exploits. So we can close off an exploit or whatever, but they're just going to move on to trying to find the next thing. That's just normal. And if not for this game, it's just normal for all games that people just try to sort of, do whatever can give them a competitive edge. So it's a thing or whatever, but all we can really do is just make changes to the game so that people can't do these things going forwards, but they're just going to then move on to trying to find the next thing.
Of course.
So
it's the nature of it.
But it's a massive step in the right direction here. This is the thing. It's a really, really big step in the right direction, and quite confident that from here that you're talking about just sort of much more minor scale balancing that really shouldn't rock a boat so much that some people might fall out of it, if you know what I mean. It should be more like calm waters. But in saying that, that's just with the transfer system. I mean, there are other things that can be added or changed in this game that could rock the boat just as much as this is, or even more potentially. Like, for example, when we add stadiums in the future, that however we do that, that's pretty much going to rock the boat.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter. Like, it's just, there's options, but whatever you do, it's just not going to be smooth, basically, implementing that. So it's going to be a transition period when that comes. That's an obvious example, but there's other things that can be added to this game.
I think that's
the time, and it's just going to cause people into, they had all of this stuff planned, but now stadiums are here, the game's changed, they've got a plan for that as well, and their plan's got to change, basically. I mean, it's just, there's not a lot we can do about that, really, until at least
I think that's the nature finished. As well. Yeah. I think that's the nature of an early access game as well, and a game that's developing as it goes. That situations are going to change, and the direction's going to change in ways, and just have to make it as smooth as possible.
Well, yes, I guess so.
Yeah, I guess.
It's as smooth as possible in a storm, I guess.
Right, well, hopefully that's covered it enough to give users a good idea of what they should expect with this latest update. As we said, we want to keep the podcast a little bit shorter, so hopefully we've achieved that with this one, and hopefully more people will listen to them, more people will get a good idea of what's to come, and mainly the podcasts are really to explain the reasoning behind things, and hopefully we've done that reasonably well. So thanks for your time, Nick. We'll post a link to this up on the forum, so if you've got anything you want to know about today's podcast, ask in the thread. We'll do our best to answer. If you've got any suggestions for future topics you'd like us to talk about, please do let us know. And thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time.